the 20th anniversary of 9/11. And, it's a reflection of the world, of the lives of the moment that we find ourselves in. I think that we want to just take this moment to quickly share our reflections on 9/11 as individuals who were uh, can remember what happened on that day,
Yeah.
but also some reflections on what's happening now with Afghanistan, where is the place where we went right after the attack as a way to avenge the over 3,000 Americans who lost their lives. Well, Americans and others, right? Because let's not forget that there were people from all over the world that lost their lives during those attacks, and the fact that there were a lot of people actually that were victim to Al Qaeda's terrorism in parts of Africa and other parts of the world before they came home here to the U.S. And then obviously the famous pivot towards Asia. And I think one of the justifications that the Biden administration has indicated was that, it's no longer in the U.S. interest to be in Afghanistan, but that he rather focus time and attention on the Eastern threat as a way to counterbalance both China and Russia, but mostly China at this point.
Yeah, and also I just want to point out that we had a discussion also last year about 9/11, the 19-year anniversary, and a lot has happened since then. So I do feel like there's definitely room for discussion there in terms of the events in the last year and also the consequences of the U.S. pulling out of Afghanistan. And one of the things that I was just thinking about as you were talking was how for the last 20 years we've been essentially in an active war, not even say wars that the United States was involved in before, where they would last say a month or 2 months, like in 1991 with the invasion of Iraq. That didn't last very long. And then you had in the late 80s, you had smaller like interventions from the US in Central America. And but after Afghanistan, we've been nonstop for the last 20 years. We haven't, ever since we were whatever age we were at that point, we have known nothing but war. The Afghanistan war, the Iraq war. So we've had this long war, which is the Afghanistan war, which has always been in the background. And then in between, simultaneously, there's been the Iraq war. There's been the destabilization of Libya, the bombing of Syria, and like the kind of like the proxy war in Syria with Russia. So it is good in a way to see this war wind down because it's been ongoing. It's been the one that's been consistent. I'm just hoping that they don't just start another one and they say, well, we already conditioned them to 20 years of nonstop war. Let's just start another one in a few years, and then that one will go on for 20 years.
Come on, Herrero, you shouldn't underestimate our ability to go into wars. I think it can happen similar to what happened in World War One or World War Two. That something, somebody attacks a NATO ally, and from an incident like that, another conflict can arise.
But you know that uh, that would be a provocation that we would do, and we would just frame it as somebody attacking our allies, and we're just defending ourselves, just the same way that during the Mexican-American War, the American soldiers were told not to pass a specific line, not to cross a river. They crossed the river, the Mexicans attacked, and they claimed that the Mexicans had attacked them. Same way as the sinking of the Lusitania, the one that I'm thinking about that never even happened. The Gulf of Tonkin for Vietnam, that never actually happened. So yeah, I mean, I don't put it past our military to find a way to claim that we're acting in self-defense. But let's get back. I feel like I got a little bit off topic here. Let's get back to 9/11 and the 20 year anniversary.
Yes, and I think, but just briefly, I also just want to say that I know that the comedian Sami Obeid did a segment just talking about how much we spend on wars, and basically he talks about the fact that we've been in war for about 227 years of the 245 years that we've been a country. Um,
Yeah, yeah, I've heard that before. Yeah, it's a business. it's a profitable business.
Yeah,
It
and I think
makes
it's also I do think that there's yes, there's a business side of it, and I think maybe the business side leads to also a sense of dominance and prosperity, right? Because I think the reason why you want to intervene is to make sure that your businesses have access to the materials cheaply, to make sure that you can sell goods, that your companies can sell goods to folks in other parts. So certainly it's good for the economy, and I think it also builds this sense of um, of pride of American exceptionalism that I know that seems to be one of those things that is a necessary ingredient, or that people see as the necessary ingredient for the U.S. to maintain that position of dominance, at whatever cost necessary.
yeah. If you want to try to simplify war to a more concrete example that I think people could understand, and so they could understand how absurd it is. It's like living in a small village or a small town where you have somebody that lives by himself and he has a neighbor who has a beautiful wife and a beautiful plot of land, and this guy wants that, and he goes and takes it. He kills the guy, takes the wife, takes the land, and now it's his. That's what war is. That's what we do. That's what capitalism is. We have a country. There's desirable minerals. There's desirable resources in other countries. We see them. We take them. And why is it that we do it? Because we can. That's pretty much what it boils down to. So in a way, war is just an extension, really, of what we do as human beings, what we really kind of do to each other also at an individual level. Because you do have a lot of individuals that would kill their neighbor and take the wife and take their land if they could get away with it. The nation state has found a way to get away with that because they get a whole bunch of people and then they convince the rest of the people that it's a good justification to go and invade and take the resources. Imagine one person trying to convince the entire village that he's justified in killing the neighbor and taking his wife and the resources. I mean, that's really hard to justify, but at a nation level, that's essentially what we do, and people buy it because the justifications are a lot easier. Oh, we have to go and invade them and take their stuff because they are denying women their rights, or because they're dictators, or because they're authoritarians. I mean, the excuses, there's just so many, but the motivation and the result is the same. We see something we want, and we're going to take it because it benefits us.
Yeah, it's definitely us versus them, and it does go back to our very primordial tribal instinct.
I think I derailed you again from the conversation, the 9/11. So, all right, let's go back to the beginning. 2001, the events happen.
Yeah, I think for me it was just disbelief at first, and I think at first I thought it was just a regular airplane accident that happened, and if I remember correctly, I know that there was a time when I think it was a helicopter, a small plane that crashed into New York. So I just kind of assumed there was an accident. And then as soon as it happened, that was my girlfriend at the time. She was from New Jersey, and I know she knew people there. So went over to her place and started watching what was going on. And then immediately I saw when the second plane hit the tower. And at that point, I was like, oh, yeah, that was not an accident, right? And I think when I first heard that a plane went into the tower, I thought that, oh, probably like a small Cessna plane. I didn't realize that it was one of those big commercial airliners. And I think that so just disbelief at first, right? In the sense of like, oh my God, what's going on? And at the same time, I think realizing that probably for many Americans, for many U.S. residents, it was probably the first time that they felt attacked since Pearl Harbor, and it's really probably the biggest attack that's happened on the mainland, and one of the reasons why I think as a country we came together. But it was also sad that immediately as we came together as a country, you started hearing things about attacks on Muslims or people who just happen to look Muslim, right? Sikhs and other quote unquote Middle East looking people. And I think immediately there was this, again, this tribal sense of like, oh, we've been attacked by people who look this way. And even though I think that for the most part, the Bush administration tried to separate, the people from the religion, I think a lot of people were just uh, easily able to just blame Muslims for what happened.
I remember there was a black comedian or some black comedians that were saying at the time how after 9/11 so many other people got to experience firsthand what it means to be black in this country. There was a joke about
How
it, but
so?
I do remember that.
How so?
Oh, because they were vilified. They were People
Mm,
were afraid of them. People were acting out against them as if somehow inherently because of their appearance, they're a threat to you. And this anger directed at other people just based on how they look, which is something that black people have experienced for generations in this country.
yeah, in some ways it was, and I think in some ways I can see where he's coming from because I do think that you know African American blacks have been vilified, right, and to an extent, um, particularly in the South, and particularly when it comes to how threatening a big black man can be to a white woman or any other woman or just anybody. But the difference is I don't think that the type of violence that society has said that we can expect from a black man is very different from a terrorist attack, right? So I think that it's there's a difference in the scale. I think
Yeah.
that we somehow expect like individual potential individual violence, but we don't expect like unless and I know some people were very much against the Black Panthers movement because they felt that it was a sort of an armed insurrection of black revolutionaries. Um, Obviously, from their perspective, it was defending themselves, protecting themselves, and
Yeah,
exercising
exactly.
their
It's
Second
empowerment.
Amendment rights to carry arms and do programs in their communities. Um, and at the same, and I think that it's complicated too because I think there's also been instances of black people being of maybe not feeling comfortable or discriminated against Muslim individuals. And not to say that, and also realizing that there's a lot of African Muslims too.
Yeah.
So it's such an interesting issue because I do feel that, and I have to say that I remember when that happens, and I think naturally too, like it's like, oh my God, like what's going on, like who is trying to hurt us, hurt me. But obviously I think the other thing, as someone who grew up outside of the United States, I also have a very different perception of what it is to be in a police state, I guess you can say.
I don't recall that being my reaction to it, feeling a sense of insecurity afterwards or fear of others. I do remember, though, that obviously we've come a long way since then, but at the time, I didn't know anything about the Middle East. Very little. And you come out of, you think the type of history that you get in school, it's American history, world history. Maybe you cover the world wars, Vietnam, but you don't do any modern day politics. You don't talk about the all of the aftermath of what's happened in the Middle East, especially after World War II. So when I started hearing about all these things, especially as a young teenager at the time, I didn't even know what to make of it. Which I guess in a way it's the ideal it's the ideal situation for anybody that wants to put forward certain rhetoric, because you have all these teenagers who have not experienced war. They're coming of age. It's a clean slate. You can program them to believe whatever you want. And so it turns out, yeah, 9/11 happens. Most of them were from Saudi Arabia, but somehow we ended up invading Afghanistan. And you actually find more ties to Saudi Arabia and the support there of extreme factions. But yet Saudi Arabia is our partner, but yet we go to Afghanistan, and then a few years later, there's a very tenuous connection to Iraq somehow, that they are able to justify Al Qaeda in Iraq, and then all of a sudden weapons of mass destruction, and then we're in Iraq now. So at the time, I was the perfect person to try to, or a whole bunch of Americans were probably in the same situation as me, where we were gullible, and we were primed to go into war, and you had so many people that signed up to go fight these wars. I mean, I don't think I was like gung ho about, yeah, let's go and attack another country. I was more like, yeah, I'm not really sure. I don't think that's a good idea. But at the time, you take what the news is telling you, and you take their word for it, because you think that they're telling you the truth. And yeah, I'm a lot more skeptical now of what the media tells me because of these experiences, because they were flat out lying, especially about Iraq.
Yeah. No, and I was going to say that to prove that point, that I think that authorization that Congress gave to President Bush to invade Afghanistan, that there was only one congresswoman who voted against it, right? So when you think of in those moments of crises and strategy, it's when I think it's the interest that take advantage of those opportunities to rally momentum and sort of focus folks in the direction that they want them to be, right? Okay, that we've been attacked. We need to respond. We need to give our president all the powers that he needs to protect us. And
which, by
let's
the way,
go get him.
they never rescinded any of those powers. That we still have the Patriot Act. We still have remnants of what happened. The powers that the type of power that they got as a result of the Patriot Act.
Yeah, and I think there's been conversations as to whether or not it's time to revisit that, whether or not that happens before we get into the 2022 electoral season. It's hard to think, because I know they're trying to get the now the the second part of the infrastructure bill done. So I doubt that debate is going to be taken on. And also, you have a Democratic Congress and Senate, and whether they will feel that it's the time to take the power from a Democratic president is yet to be seen.
And also, just as we talk about the repercussions of that war, as a result of 9/11, we go into Afghanistan, and now 20 years later, here we are. There was the withdrawal that started by Trump, started us on that path, and now here we are with Biden actually successfully pulling us out. But what did you make of this story about all of the equipment that was left behind by the U.S. military that the Taliban is now going to be able to benefit from?
Yeah, I know. I saw a helicopter
How long?
flying over Afghanistan, over Kabul with the flag, but I thought they tried to destroy as much of the equipment as they could. But obviously, I think they didn't destroy the equipment they had given to the Afghan army, and it looks like that's the beautiful equipment they left behind.
You know that the Taliban is just going to hand over all of that shiny new technology to China, which is capable of reverse engineering it and duplicating it within a few years, and maybe expanding and enhancing it and improving it within a few years. So for all of these people that are beating the drum against China, and how do you reconcile these two things, that this decision to pull out because of the way that it was done is such a poor planning of it that it gives all of this equipment to what they now consider to be the biggest enemy. Maybe it's intentional. Maybe they're gonna say, look, they have all this technology that they copied from us. We need to now go and like start this hot war or this cold war, sorry, against China.
Well, I think that certainly there was equipment that the U.S. probably left because they just couldn't take it all. They couldn't take the equipment and save uh, the thousands of lives that they tried to save and get out of Afghanistan. But I also think that there's the piece of the probably this equipment was to be used by the Afghan army, and then I think they were not counting on the Afghan army just folding the way that they did. But you're right. I think that I mean whether or not what they will do with this equipment, we'll see. Because in respects, I think the U.S. still has the over horizon capabilities, as they call it, to strike and dominate in terms of of military power for sure. Um,
They're just gonna put it
but
on. They're gonna put the equipment on eBay and sell it to like a 14-year-old out in Ohio in some farm, and then he's gonna start making YouTube videos with his new U.S. military equipment.
or he can and become a police officer and get some of that leftover military equipment that a lot of police departments get too.
Yeah, no, you're right. There was absolutely no way that they were gonna be able to remove all of this equipment because this is equipment that has been taken there over the course of 20 years. So these are right. These are resupply missions. These are equipment that is authorized to be sent there. There's a lot of logistics that goes into moving all of this equipment into that country, and you can't just take it out within a few months or even a year. And it's also really expensive. I mean, somebody probably did a cost analysis, and they were like, yeah, it's probably more expensive to take it out than just to leave it there.
Yeah, I think it in the business they call this a sunk cost, a
Yeah.
cost that you just have to live up with. But I think a couple of things though, it and to your earlier point about war, how much money is spent in war, like I'm sure that the amount of money that it takes to provide fuel for all these Humvees and everything that goes into maintaining them is an expensive proposition. And obviously, when
Think about
you're
the effect on
a,
the
pa- a
environment too.
yeah, and but when you're a power like the U.S., it's just okay. We pay what we need to pay, and I'm sure the prices that they pay for this equipment and the maintenance of it, it was astronomical. I don't think the Taliban will have those resources unless, to your point, they get it from
Hmm.
a power like China. And I think also we need to keep in mind that the Taliban now are going to have to figure out how to fund their own government, right? Are they going to rely on the sort of the illicit drug traffic, the poppy fields and things like that are that generate so much money, but they're going to need to figure out how to build an economy and provide jobs and also provide food, because I know food insecurity is now a big issue for the people, for the Afghan people who are still there.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how it unfolds for the next few years because the the best outcome for them would be to open up for investment in China, which could go in there and help them build the infrastructure. The problem is, I'm sure that's not in the U.S. interest for that to happen. So, in order to prevent a country like China or Russia from going in there and helping build infrastructure, is to keep that country destabilized. Which means that if you keep supporting acts of terror, if you keep supporting extremist groups, then the country remains in a volatile state, so that it makes China and Russia hesitate to go in there and try to help them as long as the country is unstable, which means more instability for the Afghanis, more suffering and debt for them.
Very true. Very true. Any other thoughts on this conversation?
No, I think I was a bit all over the place with the conversation. I think there's just a lot There's a lot here. I think each topic here it could take a while to discuss it, but again, I think we were just trying to reflect on what's it mean 20 years of war. All goes back to 9/11, which is the anniversary is coming up, 20 years, so it's a special 20-year anniversary, and then pulling out this year. So there's just a lot. We're living through it. One phase of this is over, but a new phase is starting. So we'll be able to see in a few years what the ramifications of this decision are.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for me, I know that 20 years has a special meaning just because I know that that's one of the ways that I believe the Mayans measure time, like in cantoons of 20 years. So in
Yeah,
some ways, there's this cycle that has been completed. And I think to your point, we'll see what happens next. And I think we are out of Afghanistan technically, but now, what's next? Is there going to be another 9/11 type of experience that we're gonna have, or are we gonna take this opportunity to learn from our mistakes and try to build our or advance our interests in a way that's less drastic than taking over a whole country and having so many people sacrifice their lives and times for our interests. So we'll see how we
yeah.
decide to pursue our national interests, and can we do it in a smarter way, in a way that hopefully results in less conflict than more.
So I don't want to. I know sometimes I end the podcast in a pessimistic tone, but so I don't want to end it today that way. So okay, so if I want to be an optimist, then yes, those are things that we can aspire to. But just part of me knows that on our own, those things are not going to happen. And I know there's a lot of people that are anti-China, anti-Russia, but honestly, the only way that we arrive at what you're saying, which is more self-restraint when it comes to these foreign interventions, is you need a balance of power. So we need a really powerful China, we need a really powerful Russia, so they can get in the way and prevent these things from happening. You need a check on the empire, and as long as you don't have that check from other countries, then we get to do whatever we want, and it's too attractive to do those things, and we won't learn our lesson because there's no point in learning the lesson because it makes money to go off and kill other people and sell equipment and steal their resources. You need a balance of power. And I know a lot of people don't like the idea of a strong China or a strong Russia, but if you want peace, if you want more of a stable environment, with also a lot of high risk, right? I mean, you could have the Cuban Missile Crisis type of scenarios when you have these like military superpowers, but at the same time, you can't just have one country doing whatever it wants around the world. That's just a recipe for disaster. So that's my optimistic tone. I can leave it at that.
Wow. Wow. No, I think part of what you're saying is correct, absolutely. But I think there's also, and I know this is even more optimistic, and some may say naive, but I think there's also an opportunity for us as a country to be self-restrained
Won't happen.
and how we wield that power, which I know is difficult to do because there are a lot of interests at hand. But I think this could be an opportunity for us to say, okay, we need to do things differently. We need to do things in a way that is not what we try to do in Afghanistan. That is not what we try to do in Korea and so many other parts of the world. We need a more restrained approach. But again, likely not to happen. But I think there's also, because I do feel that nations reflect society, and I know there's a Chinese proverb that says if you wanna change how things are, you change the person, then you change the family, then you change the society, and that's how true change comes, right? So I think it starts with all of us reflecting on how we participate and how we hold our government accountable for these types of decisions.
Okay, we'll end on that
And
positive note.
and actually, can we, since this is the Brown perspective, let's just give a shout out to our alma mater, Brown. I know that they're the Center for International Studies, the Watson Institute.
Yep.
Their study on the cost of the Afghan war has been one of those resources that has been referenced by a lot of news sources, but including on the president on his latest address. So kudos to Brown for keeping track of that information. I think it's also a very liberal academic exercise to kind of keep an accounting of what the war costed, so that way, um, when something like this, when that something a moment like this happens, we have the information to have a good conversation and make better decisions.
Yeah, definitely. Well said.
All right. So finishing on a positive note, like Herrero wants us to. Thank you so much for listening to the Brown Perspective. If you like our conversations, please listen to us on YouTube, follow us on social media, and we hope you enjoyed the rest of your day or night whenever you listening to us.
Nos vemos.
Ciao.